And we are live. How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Wardy. That is Draft Deck Mark. You all know who that is. The co-host of the Mets Up podcast here, wherever you get your podcasts. Mark and I are going to be breaking down our key takeaways and everything that you need to know from the beginning of spring training. So, in today's video, we'll be headlining the David Stearns presser, our key takeaways from that, the Mets signing of the legend himself and Ben Gamel, rather. I'm thinking Dominic Hamill, Mets prospect when talking about Gamel there. But we have plenty to get into along with ultimately what is it like this time of year in spring training, who's reporting, who are the new faces, how are guys looking, Edwin Diaz returning from injury, Starling Marte, how's he looking, and so much more, along with guys that we think could maybe surprise you this spring, maybe guys you don't know too much about, and everything in between is what we'll be highlighting in tonight's live stream along with answering your questions. So appreciate all you guys chiming in. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button for your boys, as it is the easiest and best way to support the channel. Shout out to my man Mark. How you doing today, brother?
Doing well, man. Doing well. First day of spring training. It's always a good thing. Getting baseball closer and closer. Just came back from Miami, and I've got the itch. I'm ready for real baseball to start.
So you just got back from Miami. Can you share with us for a second what that experience was like being down there for those games? Because for those that don't know, anytime that you go to any type of Winter League game, any of those Dominican games, they are something to behold. So let it rip on how that experience was.
Yeah, I mean, it was a blast. I went to the World Baseball Classic last year, and that was a ton of fun. But this was different because even though there's still like national teams, you're getting like the club team fans as well. So like for Venezuela, it was the Tiburones, and my friend Ernie, who I went with, like that's his team from Venezuela. So you're getting a lot of like diehard fans, not only of the country, but of the actual team that's playing. And it's also cool because you're just like seeing kind of a bunch of old washed up guys that like, I mean, Wilson Ramos was starting at DH for Venezuela, and Wilfredo Tovar, who you might remember from 2021 playing a little shortstop for the Mets, was their main shortstop. For the Dominican, you had Robinson Cano. So it's just cool to see these guys playing again, and the atmosphere was incredible as always. Just goes to show you that if the Marlins actually cared a little bit about baseball, they could probably get a pretty good fan base down there.
Don't even get me started. I mean, it's crazy how yet this is a team that somehow in our division is technically a rival, yet I find myself constantly rooting for the organization, the fan base side, because they keep getting screwed over. You know, for what little they have, they finally had a structure in place, are tearing it all down basically again. So, I mean, I can understand when you have a new front office in place a lot of times, similar to David Stearns, or if you're kind of in this transitionary period where you're still multiple pieces away, you can kind of dictate how much you want to set the team back because of what you want to personally build. That seems to be what they're doing there in Florida. It's unfortunate because, the World Baseball Classic last year, oh my goodness gracious, that was the best sporting experience I personally ever had, and that's saying a lot with how many awesome, amazing Met games that you and I have both been at in our lifetimes. But speaking of the amazing Mets, let's transition from that. Also, final note, the Buffalo 26-game hitting streak 2019, Wilson Ramos. That's what I love to hear. I mean, the guy's knees were absolutely cooked, but hey, he knew how to slap the ball opposite field, even if he was really behind, rather, I should say. So now let's get into it. Let's talk a bit about this stuff because spring training is always exciting. So now that pitchers and catchers are reporting, we're seeing all the nice highlight vids from the Mets and SNY. You got Shintaro Fujinami, who's not even in, so bear with us 1 second, everybody, as we try to make sure that he gets back in here. But in the meantime, I do want to shout out everyone first chiming in live on our replay. I see some loyal members in Kevin, Yoshima. I see some awesome loyal viewers in Ricky, Explosive. All you guys, thank you all so much for chiming in. Mark, you're back in. Don't worry. I don't know what happened, but we're going to continue rolling.
What is going on?
Oh, do you hear me? You don't hear me, Mark. You don't hear me, Mark, do you? He doesn't hear me. This is what we do. Hold on. I have the solution. My apologies, everybody. Technical error. Just give us 1 second so I can get this all sorted out.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab an AirPod real quick. I turned on the mic. Yeah. I just can't hear you. Let's see. All right, we're good.
Okay.
All right.
We're back and rolling. Awesome. Okay, so actually, this is not the first time that this has happened. The Casey Stern, the same hiccup happened before, where everything worked out. But I'm like, we can just call each other and do it that way. So,
Yeah.
apologies for that, guys. But I appreciate the patience. Wardy, Ron, Hat. I know I'm rocking the Knicks tonight. I know it might offend some people, but they're playing the Rockets in a little under an hour. I'm mixing it up today. Okay. I also do Knicks content on the side for Knicks Media, so check me out there once a week this Wednesday. Let's get into it, Mark. Let's talk about these new Mets. So, first question to you as we get into pitchers and catchers and everything. What are you most looking forward for out of these like new faces, especially? Like, are there any guys in particular that are reporting this time of year that you're more pumped up than maybe usual about?
I mean, like a lot of the guys that we don't really know that much about, a lot of the new arms that are coming in particular, I'm excited to see just because I want to know what they can look like, what they're going to be in this new Mets bullpen, and what Jeremy Hefner can maybe improve upon them with. Like guys, I mean, even like a Jake Diekman or like a Fujinami, like you said. I just want to see what the development, what the growth is of some of these pitchers underneath the Mets with the new pitching coach, with Jeremy Hefner being the guy for them, and even just being a part of the pitching factory now, the pitching lab that the Mets have, and seeing if they can get more out of these guys, like a Max Kranick, like has some good stuff. Maybe they can get some untapped potential there, and we have a nice little sneaky arm now out of the pen. So that's the kind of stuff that I look most forward to, along with the fact that like we're going to have Drew Gilbert in spring training. We're going to have Jet Williams. You get a closer look at these guys rather than having to watch like the 360p highlights on Twitter from, Double A.
Yeah, some of those are so brutal. It's nice to finally see these highlight videos get better. As also, shout out to a lot of the studs on Twitter. A lot of those younger Mets fans as well that love to grind those little highlight vids. They're getting it done. But yeah, pitching, big one as well, along with Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert. I mean, those are the key guys. Last year, when I had the privilege of meeting Jet for the first time, little did I know just how much he would skyrocket in this farm system in a calendar year span. But he certainly did. Drew and Ryan Clifford especially are going to be a lot of fun to get into, just because you're new kids on the block too. Like, I personally haven't seen them in person yet for any of their games. It'll be cool to hopefully meet some of them during spring training and stuff like that. But Clifford with that power especially, I'm excited for. Gilbert, of course, is the big one that many expect to crack the bigs first out of, the new baby Mets, if you will. We graduated, you could say, from the Vientos, the Beatties, and the Alvarezes to these are the next guys. But so when you look at pitching in particular, because of course pitchers and catchers are reporting today, we've seen Edwin Diaz. I really want to take a couple minutes to highlight the return of Edwin Diaz and the excitement behind this, because I know it can be easy to forget because it's been a year, over a year since Edwin last pitched in a Mets uniform. But that 2022 season was so spectacular. And I know, trust me, I know that a lot of fans expect that same Edwin. I'm here to tell you, you have to lessen those expectations a little bit. The boy's going to be rusty, but he is locked and loaded and healthy. That is the biggest takeaway. He's just so pumped up to be back in his normal regimen. So, Mark, break it down first. What was your initial reaction? Let's go back a year ago when we were both around World Baseball Classic, when Edwin goes down, to now, a full year later, to see his return. What's your excitement level like?
Yeah, I'm super pumped. I mean, he's the best reliever in baseball when he's healthy. Like you said, we're probably going to see a little bit of a slower start from him. I mean, if he comes out of the gate firing, even better. But I'm not going to put those expectations on him just yet. But I think by the end of the season, again, you're going to be looking at the best closer, best reliever in all of Major League Baseball. The guy was rocking a 50% K rate the last time that we saw him.
Sick.
Oh, if he goes down to 40%, ooh, what are we going to do? Like, we're going to be okay. And it's nice. He's electric, brings the energy. Lights out in the ninth inning, something that we missed last year, even though the bullpen at the beginning of the year did well. It adds another piece that's just solid you can rely on, something we don't really have to worry about. And I even think on the injury front, like what happened to him was just such a freak injury. One of those things where if he wasn't at the WBC, it was going to happen, on the mound during spring training, something that was going to happen, like his knee was weak. And it's unfortunate, but I think this is the kind of injury that shouldn't really affect how he pitches this season too much outside of just, shaking off the rust, essentially.
Yeah, no, I agree. And unfortunately, we just saw a similar bizarre situation happen in the Super Bowl, with the defender for the 49ers there, as Mark's trying to kill him that in the way. There you go. Yeah. So you saw, I forget the guys. Do you remember the player's name on the Niners yesterday? Was just celebrating.
Greenlaw. I don't know. I think Dre Greenlaw might be his name.
Yeah, something like that. He unfortunately, again, had his, what was it, popped Achilles right there as he was
Yep.
celebrating, and just like that, he was done. It would have, you know, the Chiefs won in the end, so I don't know if that makes it sting more or less for him versus if he was able to be a part of it if they won, that being the Niners. But I'm getting on a tangent now. Let's get back into this thing. So, speaking of spring training, as we've headlined here, let's speak of the man that spoke today, and David Stearns. It's his first spring. It's his first tenure now at the Mets. We did hear some recent comments that he spoke to season ticket holders of just over the past week or so, kind of giving a little tidbits on what to expect still, and some takeaways as a combination from that, from all I've heard from others, including Shad Keefe at Shanson's podcast, good friend of mine, as well as also what we have from the comments today. It seems like the Mets aren't done. He was asked once again, okay, should we basically say that's a wrap for the offseason and moves? And he said, pretty much no, that transactions are always going to be a reoccurring thing, especially nowadays in spring training isn't what it was like a number of years ago. There's a lot of guys still available, so multiple moves are still going to be had here as they need to. Just to make room for Shintaro Fujinami, they still probably need to put a guy on the extended IL or, of course, DFA a player, but you see all these things that David has done so far in his tenure. And when he's been asked, I'm not even going to harp on the Pete Alonso stuff because he said it once again. We're not even going to bother. That's why I haven't entertained it much at all this season, because all off season rather, because if there's one thing, and you guys did a great job at tweeting it earlier in a little meme, I cannot stand the repetitiveness with the same question every month.
Yep.
Every week since the guy has become the president. Nothing has changed. He spoke today and said that, yes, Pete Alonso, the likely conclusion is that he's going to hit the free agent market given the time of year we're in, given the fact that Scott Boras is his agent, and all these other things. And he also made it known, too, that the previous guys that were Scott Boras clients for the Mets also boded well in staying, of course, being in Nimmo and Diaz. So what remarks, if at all, do you have to say on just kind of this nonsense with Alonso? Like, I understand the question, but Stern said it himself, he's not going to provide us any updates, even if there are any. So,
yeah, I mean, the question has to be asked. I get it. Like, the reporters need to ask about Pete. It's one of the most pressing things that every Mets fan wants to hear about is Pete Alonso going to come back? Is he going to come back? And to be fair, the answer's been consistent. Pete's going to be our opening day first baseman, and he's going to hit free agency at the end of the year, most likely, which I think if you're a Mets fan, that's what you have to expect. They've been so open and honest, both sides, about what's going on here. Pete and Scott Boras have been like, we want to get paid like one of the best first basemen in all of baseball. And the Mets are like, we're going to let you hit free agency. We're not going to give you that kind of contract right at this moment. So it's one of those things where no new news has happened, but they still need to report that there's no new news in that way. And I think David Stearns knows that. About forever. So, we'll keep eyes on it. But if I'd love, like, in the middle of the night, we get like a little news drop. Pete Alonso signs an extension. Perfect. I don't need to know if you're working on it or if it's happening. Just surprise me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like a part of me, and I tweeted this earlier, part of me has the delusional Mets fandom. So when David Stern says to the media, I'm not going to let you guys know when we have updates on the back and forth, my mind thinks, so there is back and forth. So there is happening. Yeah. There are things happening right away. So if it happens, we'll find out. I mean, it would be sick, as you mentioned, just like Francisco Lindor 3 years ago. We're literally on the final moments before it was the opening day date. Locked him in right around midnight. So hopefully we can have something similar like that with Alonso, but as of now, we're all under the impression and expectation he's going to go throughout the year with the Mets, hit the free agent market, then hopefully, God willing, the Mets will bring him back and, give Alonso a much-needed and nice payday after a big 2024. So Pete stuff, we all understand that, not going to harp on anymore. But a couple things that I definitely want to harp on from David today is, the continuation of this back and forth with, there's no perfect answer in adding at bat. And I know that you have been a heavy proponent and still wanting to add externally only if it's Jorge Soler. So here's my question. If the Mets do find themselves in a position where they do land, say, a JD Martinez, which I think is still very wishful thinking at this point in time, do you think that would be more of a net negative than a net positive, considering Soler is your only option?
No, I don't think it's a net negative. Like, I think JD Martinez makes the team better. I think I'd be stupid if I thought that he was going to make this team worse. Like, he still is a good hitter. He had a great season last year with the Dodgers. I just get worried with an older player like that. Dodger Stadium low-key is one of the more hitter-friendly parks, especially for home runs in baseball. If you look at the park factors, just sneaky, one of the top in home runs every single year. Along with the fact that JD has his hitting whisperer over there in LA. and he's like super, super, I don't want to say anal, but the way that he goes about like his hitting prep and what he does, like they took away the iPads that one year in Boston or whatever, and he struggled. It was one of his, weaker years of recent times, completely threw him off. So, I mean, if he's going to move to the Mets, I'm sure he feels comfortable with whatever they're going to be doing. And I think he is better than what our DH options are right now. Like they would be better. It's just for me, like at that point, do I really want to give JD Martinez that contract, or do we just figure out like who's going to be filling in there? I don't know. I don't know if he takes us from being like an 85 win team to like an 87 win team, or an 82 win team to an 85 win team. I don't know if he's that big of a difference maker right now, just because he is a DH and he's going to have to ball out for that to happen.
Right. And it's a key question regarding DH because as you and I spoke last time, the only reason why us fans have such a gripe is because they have yet to put some type of sustainability in that position, especially in one where you want protection for Alonso. I mean, it's actually remarkable when you look at Alonso's numbers. He has more pitches thrown to him outside the zone than I'm pretty sure any other batter in baseball, and his effectiveness is through the roof. I mean, it's actually remarkable. So like even when you look at his down 2023 and just the contact ability, like yes, the injury played a part. Also, Alonso is pretty streaky from the beginning last year too. Like outside of like a month and a half, he really didn't have a lot going, and he struggled to go opposite field like at all too. So those things played factors. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here with Pete, and and this goes for others too. Actually, I completely lost my train of thought, Mark. Do you remember what I was saying like 2 seconds ago?
You were saying about how the Mets need more sustainability at DH to protect him.
Yes, exactly. So here's my question to you before we get on to some more comments I want to highlight from Stearns today. So if you don't get JD Martinez, you don't get Jorge Soler, you're left with those in-house options. What is your personal opinion on Mark Vientos? And is that a situation where you would like the Mets to kind of platoon with DJ Stewart? Because in my opinion, while I can understand it, I also see how that could hurt Vientos' continued development versus giving him continued reps versus going back in this kind of platoon role similar to last year where it's like, oh, you're only going to be batting against lefties or something like that. So how do you feel?
I mean, it's definitely tough. I think I'm a lot lower on Vientos than most.
Okay.
I was a little bit disappointed with what I saw last year. Obviously, like the top end stuff from him is awesome. He hits the ball hard. Like he does the things that you kind of can't teach. Like some people just can't hit the ball that hard. He can do that. He has great opposite field power. I actually think he generates great backspin when he does hit the ball in the air. Where he struggles, of course, is pitch selection. Where he struggles, of course, is just straight up like whiff rate, contact rate. Not great at that, and just consistency. And you could also say that because he wasn't playing consistently enough last year, it was really hard to get into a rhythm. I've talked to players about that before, and they say the same thing. It's really hard when you get to play once or twice a week and you're expected to perform at your best. It's really difficult. So I'm not going to give up on Vientos, but I do think that if they're going to keep it in-house, the best way to go is with that platoon of DJ Stewart and him at the DH spot. Weirdly enough, Vientos like hit righties relatively well last year. Like
he did.
I think he hit Felix Bautista, like go figure, like one of the nastiest pitchers in baseball. He had
make it make sense.
So yeah, make it make sense. And then, he can't hit like, I don't know, whoever sucks, like Bryce Elder. But like at the end of the day,
the Braves fans that watch my content are not going to be happy with that one. That was great.
Yeah. No, sneak it in there a little bit. But like at the end of the day, I think putting him at AAA doesn't do anything for his development. I don't think platooning is best for his development either, but you need to try and win games, and I think that does give you the best opportunity to win games if you're going to rock with the in-house options. Because again, I also don't want DJ Stewart facing lefties. Like there's no reason he should be doing that. That's also where you're going to see his numbers drop down. So it's not like an easy fix or an easy scenario, but at the same time, like Vientos will also be competing for third base. So if he wants to play, it's as simple as win it. Win the position, win at bats, and you will play. Prove it. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I've been under this belief that Beatty, again, it's his job to lose for third base, assuming that they don't sign someone, because if they do, like a Urshela or a Solano, that may throw a wrench into things a little bit on how much they're utilizing those positions. But, especially if Beatty's there, it's his job to lose. I feel like the Mets may put themselves in a situation where they get below average defense from both Beatty and Vientos, but they're going to just focus on the bat if it gets to that point, and who's going to carry them. So if Beatty, not that I wish it, but let's say Brett continues to struggle as a quad A player, can't lift the ball at the MLB level, does it all at the AAA level, and he isn't even a league average defender, and Mark Vientos might be, a kind of bad glove, to put it lightly. He's looking brutal
Yeah.
there at times. Needs to get his he needs to get his feet planted properly when he's throwing to first. But if he can do all those things and say gives you a bat that 250 average can actually hit you for a 20 to 30 home run pace, then it's hard to not at least consider that heavily if you're the Mets, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Vientos is hitting 250, I mean, something's going incredibly right. Like right now, I see him as like a 210 hitter, and like that's from what I've seen recently. So if he's hitting 250, I mean, shit, the Mets are doing big things. If they can get 250 and 20 home runs out of Vientos, watch out, they're going to be competing for a playoff spot here. But it's going to be hard the way that I saw him play last year. Like I have more faith in Brett Beatty personally, hitting and defensively. I think Vientos is for sure not a third baseman, where I think Beatty can be.
Yeah, I think Beatty's far more the athlete between the two.
Definitely. And it's not even that Vientos is a bad athlete. I think like he's just not a great third baseman. Like sometimes you just don't play the position that well. I think that's kind of what's happening with him. But also I'm interested to see what the coaching does. We have like a brand new coaching staff in, and a lot of new brains involved in what's going on. And maybe that's what they needed. I mean, there was at times last year where saw Brett Beatty doing like the weirdest third base drills ever, like on the warning track. And I'm like, what in the world? How is this going to help him learn how to play third base, fielding ground balls on the warning track? Didn't make sense to me. So maybe these new minds, these new brains will help these guys develop, because that's really what needs to happen right now is the guts of these guys are good players. Now, how do we get them to be great major league players and not just guys who made it to the majors?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And when you look at this team's makeup heading into this season too, while there are a lot of question marks, I think organizationally there's a floor here that we're going to see quicker than maybe what fans maybe realize, including this spring training. It's going to highlight all of it, how much depth and how much this is going to have a positive impact on the team. And as we pivot now, and there's a couple more comments on Stearns I want to address, but briefly, so I don't forget, I do want to headline just, this is the roster announcement as of today. This does not include Shintaro Fujinami yet, but don't worry, he's already with the Mets. Literally, there are clips of him in Port St. Lucie right now. I promise you. They're still figuring out everything. I don't know if there was a medical hiccup or visa. I mean, it can't be visa, obviously. I don't know what it is, but they'll get that figured out. Probably, actually, now that I say that, it's probably just an IL situation, because I don't think that they can put someone, a certain guy, on the IL or DFA until Wednesday.
Okay.
So that could be throwing a wrench in things on the announcement. But regardless, these are the following players that will all be partaking in Mets spring training. And that is with Austin Adams, who is no longer currently in the Mets bullpen. He is staying in the organization, but was sent outright there to AAA. Phil Bickford, Jose Buto, Kyle Crick, who David Stearns did announce today is going to be missing most, if not all, of spring training with a calf strain. Kyle Crick was a non-roster invite, known, if I'm not mistaken, for a nasty slider, because that's been the case with most of these non-roster invite guys. Edwin Diaz, of course, Jake Diekman, Reed Garrett is an interesting name to look at. Dominic Hamill, who I'm pulling hard for, great guy. Grant Hartwig, who didn't have the greatest stretch for his Mets debut last year. I mean, just not debut, but his first season in the bigs. But there is still some stuff about Grant Hartwig that I do like. Adrian Hauser, that's an interesting one. He spoke to the media recently. All he cares about is winning, doesn't care how he's utilized, which I think is awesome. We need that selflessness in this clubhouse and on this field. Max Kranick, who I've had the pleasure of speaking with, he's going to be on the channel sooner than later. Kranick, great guy. For those that don't know, Max Kranick, originally when he made his MLB debut, he pitched like 5 scoreless innings. Then there was a rainout that did it for him, unfortunately. Made his debut with the Cincinnati Reds, grew up a diehard Mets fan, guys. So when Max Kranick is on the channel, you guys got to gas him up, pump him up. I want you to be rooting for him mad hard in spring training. Everyone that goes to those, it's going to be a blast. Shout out to you, Max. But all right, now we got Max Kranick, Nate Lavender, which I actually, just for a second, what's your thoughts on Nate Lavender briefly, Mark? Because this is a name I've heard a decent amount actually online from fellow Mets fans saying, don't sleep on Nate Lavender. This might be the southpaw for this Mets pen this season. I know that he's had his flashes of brilliance, but how do you feel about him?
Yeah, I think he's fine. I'm not going to hype him up. I need to see him pitch like this spring training a little bit more, and especially now with getting Jake Diekman, I feel like there's really no spot for him right now.
Right.
But he was a guy who had some decent success in the minors last year. Again, not really too familiar with his stuff, just because there's no reason to worry about like a 25-year-old left-handed reliever right now. But yeah, I mean, give him a shot. Let's see what he's got. I think he did well in spring training last year. So
I can't help but find myself thinking not about Nate Lavender, but a year before, and what's his name? Was it Jake Fisher? or something.
Oh no, Nate Fisher. Nate
Nate
Fisher.
Fisher. It was close, right? Yeah, when he had that huge outing against the Phillies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, shout out to the fish god himself. But okay, we got Nate Lavender, Jorge Lopez, of course, recent pickup. That actually, as crazy as it is when you look at his numbers last year, similar to Shintaro Fujinami, I feel pretty high about him. Just his stuff
Yeah.
is there for sure. Electric fastball, like the breaking pitches quite a bit. He has plenty of movement too. So I think the Mets, I mean, Jorge Lopez is one of multiple guys in this pen that could easily be a setup man at some point this season for the Mets, where they don't need to have a lock of, okay, Adam, you need to be our guy every night. No, I think the Mets finally have a nice little rotation of 2, 3, 4 guys that can get that job done for Edwin when need be. So you have him in there. You, of course, have Joey Fuego, Joey Lucchesi. Shout out to him. Hopefully he'll have himself a big year. He's going to be looking to crack this Mets team any way possible. Sean Manaea, of course, who I deemed as the Mets Aquaman now, because we've seen Noah Syndergaard as Thor. The hair's luscious. He's got the whole Samoan look. I mean, you would think he's literally an Aquaman as we speak right now. I thought it was him when I was watching like a couple weeks ago with my girlfriend. So we got him in this rotation too, working with that sweeper. Excited to see what Manaea can bring. We got David Pearson, who of course is going to be out for multiple months with injury. Adam Ottavino, Eric Orzi, who just a year and a half ago I was pretty high on. He unfortunately has had more lateral growth thus far in his career at best than any upward direction, but he's another arm that's going to be looking to compete for the pen. Tyler McGill, of course, working with that little bit of spork ball, seeing how that command looks. Jose Quintana, Brooks Raley, Johan Ramirez, Sean Reed Foley, yes, SRF is back, Yaxel Rios, Ken Robinson, Christian Scott is the big name to look at, folks. Definitely a guy to watch this spring. One of the key Mets prospects that's more than likely going to impact the club this year. Kodai Senga, of course, Luis Severino, Chad Smith, Drew Smith, Cole Sulzer, Michael Tonkin, Mike Vassell, Josh Walker, Danny Young, I'm exhausted saying these names, Austin Allen, Francisco Alvarez, Omar Narvaez, Tomas Nido, who has been working, I've been seeing him hitting the cages lately, Kevin Parada, Hayden Senger, who has been like in the organization forever, I feel like, as the Mets like AA or AAA catcher. He's cheated in both leagues every year, I feel like. Luis Angel Acuna, who of course we're excited to see, Pete Alonso, Rylan Bannon, we'll get into, Drew Gilbert, Taylor Colway, probably butchered the last name, Starling Marte, Brandon Nimmo, Alex Ramirez, DJ Stewart, Tyrone Taylor, Trace Thompson. All right, Mark, this is where you have to recite everything I just said in order.
Well, luckily for you, I've got the roster up as well. I was looking at it while you were reading it.
Oh, there you go. So out of that roster in particular, and again, there isn't too much more I want to highlight from Stearns today. I'm back and forth with this, but when you look at the roster, especially this list in particular, out of the new guys, who are some guys that you think are going to surprise some people this spring, where it's like you don't know much about him, but just wait, like he's someone that may really, really surprise you?
I don't know. Mets fans are probably going to fall in love with Joey Wendell, just like a worse version of Jeff McNeil. So, like, if he hits for a high average, the old Mets fans are going to be like, "Oh, it's Joey Wendell, man. This kid can play." Like, he's got no batting gloves. He wears like black cleats, keeps the pants like down. I think like just the most like 1930s baseball player ever that's just happening to play in 2024. So I think Mets fans are going to quickly fall in love with him again, just like scrappy guy. And he'll just be better than like Luis Guillorme was. So like that's good.
He does look like he's from like 100 years ago. So you're right.
Yeah, he looks like he's been transplanted into this millennium now. And then Harrison Bader, I think, is another guy too that Mets fans know him probably more from the Yankees, just because he had that little run in the playoffs with them. I think you're just going to like that this dude plays really hard. Another guy who's great defensively in center field. Whatever he gives you at the plate, you're just going to have to kind of take it at that point. There's hot and cold streaks with him for sure, but he's going to be making some outstanding plays in the outfield that will probably get some Mets fans excited.
Yeah, and those are great picks too. And I'm teetering because it's like, do I want to pick guys that I think the fan base as a whole may be surprised about? Because if I label Shintaro Fujinami, there's this huge portion of the fan base that has no clue who he is, just looks at the numbers and they're like, this guy's cheeks. I'm like, for that reason, that's why I think he's going to surprise you, because his stuff alone is going to be absolutely electric all spring long. So stay tuned for that. But if I had to pick someone that maybe is not in the same light as that, because there's a big group of people that are hyped about him, including myself, even for a guy with a 7+ ERA, I think I have to probably go with a couple guys. One is Tyrone Taylor. You pick Harrison Bader, I'm going to go with Tyrone just
Yep.
because, again, he has plenty of power behind that bat. He's a fastball hitter, so I'm curious to see how he's going to look this spring as well. Not that it means too much. I mean, Tommy Pham was a horrendous hitter last spring for the Mets, and he ended up being one of their most consistent guys leading up to the trade deadline. So this is the same Tommy Pham that decided to go to the Super Bowl yesterday, leave at halftime, and then take a photo watching the rest of the game from his pad and be like, it's much better watching here. Like that's the funniest
Love
shit.
Tommy Pham.
There's no way. I'd like to believe there's not a chance in hell he bought those tickets himself and he was invited. And that's why he was so short.
Gotta be.
There's no, with the way he is about his money, I find it so hard to believe. I really do. But regardless, final thing I'll say about here, outside of Tyrone Taylor, who of course is going to be the Mets' fourth outfielder heading into the season, he will get a decent amount of playing time in certain stretches based on matchups. And there's one arm that I have to pick, especially because there's a lot of awesome relievers. I am certainly going to go with Jorge Lopez because this is a name that a lot of fans, again, don't know too well. He really, if you look at his numbers, 2022 was the anomaly. You know, last year was a really bad year for him statistically. This stuff's always been there. But you can also make the argument that 2022 was a career best year for him by a decent stretch. So is he going to be able to show those flashes again of that brilliance, or is he going to continue to be this reliever that's just anything but consistent? So it's a big question mark with him, but he has all the stuff like Fujinami, how I feel. So that's why I'm hyping him up the way that I am. So yeah, that's really how we feel. If anyone has their picks in the live chat, let us know. Stearns is a 99-cent store GM. Appreciate the donation. It says Hakeem the Dream. And let's put it back into David Stearns because, you know, a lot of people are going to give him gripes, of course, about going about the offseason the way that he has. But there's something that I really do appreciate about David Stearns. It's that everything is very calculated. And this is not short-term. This is a long-term build. And the big difference between the moves that he's doing versus, I guess, the false promise that we had with someone like Billy Epler, where he said a lot of the same thing, where we're focusing short and long-term, is that Billy also had in the back of his mind, to what degree, I don't know. I can't speak on his behalf, but having the pressure of knowing that you're still kind of an interim GM and you're on a year-by-year basis, like there's not any stability here, can stress out a guy. So naturally, in a win-now stage, you're going to make fairly aggressive moves, and they're either going to work or they're not. And with that aggressiveness, completely disregarded the depth. And that hurt this team so bad. So David's ability to not only provide the depth, but put them in now a position where, yes, if we want to trade for guys, we absolutely can. It has to be at the right price. That's why the Mets didn't trade for Corbin Burns. I had some people tagging me saying, Wardy, why didn't the Mets get Corbin Burns? You know, look at the trade with the O's. They didn't even give up nearly as much pieces as you thought they would. It's because it's still the O's, and they had the pieces that the Brewers had probably been eyeing for a good stretch of time. Headlined by Hall there to be stretched as a starter. The Mets don't have pitching to part with. We need pitching, not the other way around, you know?
And
so it's a silly thing.
I think it's also getting understated, too. Like, the Mets had stuff, but they didn't have what the Brewers necessarily wanted. Like, they got 2 major league ready players right now. The Mets don't really have that to give up. And I don't think the Brewers were going to make that trade with David Stearns. I think they're like super upset that the Mets just took their GM and made him the president. Like,
I think they are too.
Remember those like leaks came out from like the Brewers were like, yeah, we were trying to trade for Pete Alonso. The Mets took a call about Pete Alonso at the deadline last year. It's like, I mean, yeah, you called their phone, they answered. That doesn't mean that they were actually interested. Like they're clearly trying to stir shit up. So I think they were like, we're not giving it to you unless you give us like the best prospects possible. So I don't know. People, like you said, people give Stearns a hard time. I think it's really important too. Like you look back at this free agent class, and truthfully, like the guys that you would want, right? Like let's talk about it. Like honestly, Shohei Ohtani, you would have wanted Aaron Nola and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Who else was really worth all this money that you wanted to like spend? Like Cody Bellinger's still available. Blake Snell's still available. These guys are still available, and the Mets aren't the only team that didn't sign them. All 30 teams in Major League Baseball haven't gone after this guy. So, like, you're upset the Mets didn't sign, I don't know, like, you look at we didn't get Justin Turner. Oh, we didn't sign a 39-year-old third baseman. Like, who cares?
Matt Chapman's in the corner, like, I'm still here, guys.
We didn't sign Lourdes Gurriel to a 3-year contract. That would have been a huge mistake. I feel like all the moves the Mets made this offseason, like, there's nothing that makes you go, this is going to bite them in the ass in the future, where we've had a couple deals recently that have done that to us. So, like, again, Mets fans, I implore you to take a look at what the free agent class was We were never getting Ohtani. It wasn't happening. Once he signed with the Dodgers, we were never getting Yamamoto, and Aaron Nola signed with the Phillies a week into the offseason. Like, what exactly were the Mets supposed to do this offseason that would legitimately make this team better for the future? I don't think there's much there.
Yeah, I think the only exception again is if you find yourself in a win-win trade scenarios, and this actually takes me.
That would be it.
And that takes me back to some remarks David had off air in the public eye, but was to the public when it was for season ticket holders. And one of the things I heard in particular is that he was asked again about the thoughts of still adding the bat and stuff like that. And he said that going into player evaluation too, a very important thing for him as well is their previous stops. We know he's made an emphasis with big market, but he emphasized big market, and he furthermore emphasized Boston as a key city in particular, where it's like, especially if guys have experience there. Jake Deepin, for example, had experience in Boston, right? So, and then of course everyone started a JD chant. He was like, all right, like I can't start talking about it like to that extent. But yeah, it seems like, again, David is very calculated. He's not done making moves, but he's very wary of this 110% tax. And something, truthfully, that I didn't acknowledge as much heading into the offseason as I have now, since really the heart of the Yamamoto sweepstakes, is the magnitude of the tax and understanding why the Mets are operating the way that they are. It all makes perfect sense. Again, 110% tax is no easy thing. And for David, I mean, he has his plate unbelievably full here, when a lot of this is moves that he didn't do, right? Like, he's trying to undo, not necessarily, if they are wrong decisions by Billy and Steve, okay. Like, Steve's made wrong decisions since becoming owner. The guys at the helm and Zach Scott's Porter. Actually, I can't even say that Jared Porter did a thing wrong outside of what he did outside of the Mets. But seriously, everyone the Mets have hired, to lead the way, Sandy at times, they've all had their mistakes, but this has been something where they finally have someone now that is so focused on not only righting the ship from the previous issues, so clearing these dollars. The Mets have a lot coming off the books at the end of the year to really focus on this upcoming offseason and then some, but to build a sustained, successful winner. What I thought was really interesting from this presser too is someone asked David, hey, like, when you were spending the past year, abroad away from the Brewers, like, what exactly was going on? Because David had made note that, yes, like, he had tried out different sports. And he's like, I can't go into specifics, but I did dabble and get an understanding of the European football field, of course, and seeing how front offices go about similar-minded issues in baseball elsewhere. Why is that important to me? It's important because David spent probably months on end this past year going all over the place for all these different sports to understand different front offices' minds. Mind you, probably some brilliant people outside of himself. And now he's trying to cultivate this all now, something that he probably had fully planned at least the past calendar year that he would be bringing to the Mets. I find it very hard to believe that David was in a position where when the Mets asked him, when finally got permission this time, it's like, oh, I mean, I never thought about this. Now I have to rethink everything, of course. So what's your thoughts on David, not only from the remarks that we heard today, but just on his entire philosophy? Not the approach with the moves that we've seen per se, but the calculatedness, knowing that there may be a risk involved, but they're making sure that the potential reward still far outweighs said risk in a lot of these situations.
No, I'm happy he's got the keys to the car. Like, I want him to be the driver. I want him making all the decisions like he is. I trust him. Until he gives me a reason not to, this is the guy that I want in charge, making all the moves. And like you said, the fact that he's looking elsewhere, wasn't satisfied with like being a great GM already. He wanted to see what other practices and things that he could learn. Just shows you that he's not done. You don't want to ever be stagnant in anything that you do. It's never great. And I think that's one thing that kind of happened a little bit last year for the Mets. The Mets didn't really get better. And if you're not getting better, you're getting worse.
Right.
Whatever marginal pieces that it are to even get better, that's a huge thing. And granted, this team is probably worse than what started last year. But if you look at what was at the end of the season last year, this team is better, I think, than they were at the end of the season. Like, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people and play some really good baseball. It's a weird feeling because we were so close to being, on top of the world with the Mets back in 2022. That season was amazing. Last year sucked. This year has feelings of disappointment because, again, we missed out on Ohtani and Yamamoto and the biggest guys of the offseason. Right. But at the end of the day, that was probably unrealistic. Yamamoto was probably the most realistic one. He picked the Dodgers. They tried. So I don't know what Mets fans could want out of David Stearns than what he has done. And I just really hope that the guy like the Severinos, the Hausers, the Manayas, I hope they pay off double just so that it shuts up the idiots who were complaining about this and so that the Mets play well. Like the best thing that can happen here is that everybody who's upset looks even more dumb than they already do. And David Stearns continues to look like the genius he is. And these guys hit.
And I think that's ultimately going to be the reality in a lot of this. Not all of it. Of course, you're going to have the fans that are just salving at the mouth of the Mets just missing playoffs. All part of the plan. You know, even though that very much is in line with how this year can go. You know, like, of course, we want to make playoffs. That's something that he's confident in. And the big question, and it sucks that we find ourselves in this predicament because as a younger Mets fan myself, I feel like I've been in this situation every year as a young Mets fan for the most part. But it's the trade deadline. You know, as we get there, especially with expanded playoffs now, you can't even say, oh, if say we're 5 games out of it right now, that we should warrant selling. Because all it takes is one streak and a couple losing streaks that we've seen to ridiculous magnitudes the past couple of years entirely, where you're saying, oh my God, there's a great chance to actually strike here. You know, like there are many Mets fans that believe that if they decided to buy last year, maybe it would have stuck in wild card. Maybe that would have been true. I wouldn't have had a good confidence level if that were to be true because they played like dog shit all year. But hey, to each their own. But I guess what I'm getting at here is, this is going to be a huge obstacle. So while there's plenty of learning that we have with David as is, that deadline too is going to be equally important because he's going to obviously stay true to this mindset heading into the year. But it's like if you're in David Stearns' shoes, right, and you're about to be a buyer down the road by the deadline and say you really are in that teetering spot where you're multiple games out of a playoff spot, but you know that all it takes is hopefully a couple pieces and a win streak, and you're right back in it. Is that enough to warrant potentially giving up some, you know, decent prospect capital? You know, that's the big question. So that's the big thing that I'm looking for this season with David. Yes, the early goings has definitely played a part with everything he's done to this point, but I think how he handles the deadline, because we saw Billy handle it really well last year for what needed to be done. But when Billy was a buyer, he handled it as bad as one can possibly do it. And I mean that as someone who initially, you know, was giving benefit of the doubt that first month. If you weren't named Michael Givens and you weren't in attendance in that DC game for his debut where I was, where I spent 20 minutes trying to record a game recap, but the Nationals kept scoring because we rushed this guy in here. Unless you're a Michael Givens type, you know, early on that first month with Vogelback and Naquin did great, and then it all fell flat on its face. So that's paired with the DH position again, where it's like us Mets fans, we want to see stability there. So hopefully we can finally have it. I do see a donation here, and then we'll get on to wrapping up the show here sooner than later. Guys, thank you so much for chiming in. Make sure to smash a like and subscribe on for your boys as we're just breaking down all the latest in Mets land, especially spring training here, which has, you know, like officially began today. Is there an official label? Is there on the calendar it says today's like the actual day of spring training, or is it really just when guys start to show up?
I mean, I think like pretty much all the players are there. Like even from my experience last year, like the guys are all down there super early. Maybe a couple guys come in a few days later, but I think it's like pitchers and catchers have to report today, and then players have to report a week later. But the guys are all ready to go down there. Like the week difference for them, they're like, whatever. Like I'm living in Florida already. Let's just go. But yeah, there like technically is, I think, mandatory report dates, but it started today.
Gotcha. Okay. Noted. Yoshima says right here, I know they're two completely different sports, but I can't stop thinking about the 2024 Mets are very similar to the 2023 Packers. An evaluation year, see what the kids can do for the greater future. I mean, just the fact that the Packers made the playoffs, and let alone had the success they did, was insane. I mean, if us Mets fans got the equivalent of that, a wild card spot, and you pass the wild card round, we literally, like, we're going to act selfish then and be like, we're winning the whole damn thing. And when in reality, we're going to lose the next round. But the point is for that stretch, that would be magical. We couldn't ask for much more at Mets fandom if that is what the year had drawn up for us. So I guess we'll see in regards to that. But going back now for a second, you know, Mark, of course, you had the pleasure for a couple of years being in the Mets organization, working with them. And I want to ask, what was your key takeaways getting the feel of spring training, the player regiments, all those things, like from a fan perspective initially versus actually getting a chance to see more one-on-one what these players are going through? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean it's really cool. Like just getting to see these guys work every single day was really intriguing, especially like the drills and stuff that you don't get to see on TV, the stuff that doesn't get televised. Because you'll see them take some ground balls, you'll see
Right.
them throw some bullpens. Like they'll show that on SNY, but hanging out at the facility for like 8 hours during the day and being like, oh, like I just saw Tyler McGill lift, and then I saw him stretch, and then I saw him run, and I saw him throw, or even like a guy like Jeff McNeil, it's like, oh, he took ground balls at second base today. He's taking him at third. He's taking him in left, center, right. The different drills that they're working on, the situations that they're working on. It's cool because not the same. I want to make that very clear. High school baseball, not the same, but it felt very like pure watching it because you're just like going through like situations. It reminded me of like a high school type practice in that you're working on all these little things and you see these mega superstar baseball players every single day during the season. You don't do this stuff because you don't have the time. You show up to the ballpark, you play your game. But during spring trainings where you get to almost get like that pure baseball vibe of just like working on the little things, making sure you get in shape, making sure you get in rhythm, watching at bats, watching BP, watching the guys joke around with each other. It's just a cool inside look at stuff that you don't really ever get to see. And that's why I'm like, man, if they could do like a Hard Knocks on baseball, it would be amazing. It would be so good.
Well, I mean, we have essentially started that. Wasn't there just an announcement recently that the Boston
the Red Sox,
Red Sox are basically getting that with Netflix, which is awesome. I think it would have been awesome if they picked the Red Sox just a couple years ago, per se, versus what we're getting this season. But still, hopefully that's in the right direction, because one of the things that birthed my baseball fandom to the magnitude it did is especially watching awesome docs and being able to relate with players. So like everything that you just said there, I agree. Especially my first experience being at the facility at spring training last year was exactly what you said. You feel like you're able to not only relate with the players on a different level too, because again, they're doing these simple routines that you're accustomed to seeing, whether you even if you just played, I don't know, t-ball or whatever. Like we've all been there, we've went through those things. So it really kind of humbles things in the sense of it puts on a further show of just how much grind and commitment these guys put in, but at the end of the day, for a kid's game. And that's what makes it so fun. That's really what makes the beauty of it.
I definitely want to like hit home is that these guys work really hard. Like you might, like, let's just talk about Daniel Vogelback. Everybody hated him. He was fat, like whatever. But he was working just as hard as everybody.
He grinded his ass off every single day.
There was never a moment that I was there for the week or so where I was like, man, Vogelback's doing nothing. Like if he wasn't hitting, he was working on, like he was watching film. He was working on base, like sounds crazy, but like working on base running, taking some ground balls at first base. Like he was constantly working. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. So that's where it's like, I will probably never call out a player ever again for not working hard or not giving what I deem enough effort, because they always are. It's just a really long season. Like even Marte, we know why he wasn't running it out last year. The guy was hurt. But like that amount of work that they put in, like you said, for a kid's game to play, for our entertainment, essentially, I'll never count them out on that. You can talk about their performance, like this guy stinks, whatever. But I'll never like give someone crap for dogging it, essentially, because they all work really hard.
And speaking of dogging it, let's talk about the guy who's known for, literally no pun intended, raw dogging it for a second. Frank the Tank. Now, the reason why I bring up Frank is because little did I know that I would find myself in a conversation for the first time with Trevor May on a live stream where he's the one to bring up Frank to me. So just for a second, and because I'm going to clip this probably as a separate video, because I don't think a lot of people have seen it yet. Some of the things that were said in that, and because it was almost a 2-hour long show. But a key takeaway for me was, as we got towards the end, someone had a great question. Like, what is perception of the Mets to players, and what factors come into coming here? And he emphasized how obviously it's different for everyone. The big market, they know what they're signing up for. They have to understand that. But he basically said it like yes, like guys like Frank that are able to get that much of a reach where everyone like knows about him, it does turn off players. So totally. That's the big thing. That's the one thing. I don't have an ill will personally with Frank, but the whole shtick pisses me off entirely, mainly because it adds fuel to the fire for everyone else. All it continues is the LOL Mets meme. That's the problem. Mets fandom is true. His Mets fandom is true. There is no one denying if he's a true Mets fan or not. But there is also no denying that this is also a certain way for a reason, and it's always to shed the Mets in a negative light. So that's what pisses me off about that entire situation. Like the entire Braves team loving Frank.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Frank, I think Frank low-key is
Him
a
and
Braves
Sal
fan.
Licata.
I mean, my point exactly. So I digress. I'm people ask me all the time, have Frank on the show, have him on all these things. And no, it's Frank's got to ask, and then I'll talk to him then and go from there.
Listen, I'll give it to him. The guy is a content machine. There's no doubt about it. But like you said, I wish he was a fan of another team. I really wish he wasn't like the biggest Mets fan that everybody knows. It sucks, but whatever. He's got his shtick that he does, and you know what? When the Mets start winning, that's when this whole thing dies, and that's really what I look forward to is the winning.
That's a crazy thing, right? If it wasn't for that downfall in 2022, I'm left wondering where things would be at with Frank. I think Frank would still be on a pedestal because obviously he'd be able to mock his Devils, his Dolphins, and everything he does with Barstool. But no, that's a good point. I like that. So as we now
just win.
Just one, baby. And as we get now to wrapping things up, no better way to kind of conclude our conversation here than talk about the most important news of the day. Mark, can you please let me know what your personal knowledge is of the legend himself and Ben Gamel? For those that don't know, a 31-year-old Mets signed on a minor league deal with an spring training invite. Ben has been in the bigs since 2016, most recently with the Padres. What do you got to say about Ben?
He's Ben Gamel. He is one of the outfielders of all time. He hits left-handed and he throws left-handed. He's 5'10", 180, and he has played for the Yankees, the Mariners, the Brewers, the Guardians, Pirates, and Padres. There's nothing to talk about with him. Like, if this guy makes the team, something's either gone catastrophically wrong, or Ben Gamel has become a stud, and we have to play him. Like,
he's
one
like
of those
our new
two
DJ
things is going to
Stewart.
happen. Yeah, exactly. Like all of a sudden we got another DJ Stewart. So like, yeah, good. You know what it is? It's good minor league depth. I think this is better than some of the guys that we've had in the minor. He's not Aaron Altair, thank God.
Oh
like,
my God! Don't get me started,
yeah.
Aaron Altair.
It's not John Mayberry. So like,
no,
he's better than those guys, but the expectations are so low. That's my take on Ben Gamel. He's an outfielder that the Mets signed. I think if you put any more time into it, like you're exhausting yourself for no reason.
Which is why everyone wonders why I usually do the concept that I do. It's like, Wardy, you don't need to talk about this waiver claim. I'm like, I know, but he might strike out some guys. You don't understand. So,
dude, I think pitchers are way more valuable to talk about. Like a guy who's like fighting to be like our sixth outfielder. It's like Ben Gamel. Like, I hope you do great. I hope you surprise me, but that's it. That's Ben Gamel.
Yeah, I mean, Ben joins Trace Thompson as two, you know, MLB caliber players that'll be likely in the farm for the Mets. Assuming they stay in AAA, there's always the likelihoods of them mutually agreeing to opt out of deals. Like, I don't know the specifics of their deals or anything like that, but what I do know is that the Mets have a lot of outfield depth right now, which is good. You can never have enough depth. But here's the question with Ben Gamel. Do you think Ben Gamel's addition at all throws a wrench into potentially when we could see Drew Gilbert up this season if he has a normal spring and stays with the Mets in AAA?
No, I think this has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
I think this is literally just one of those things where you need to you just bring in a lot of guys during spring training. You try to fill out that AAA roster as well. You want to make sure that you have good guys just in case bad things happen. I think this has nothing to do with Drew Gilbert. I think if Drew Gilbert continues to be the player that we have seen, his impact and coming to the major league level won't be any slower because of Ben Gamel.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. And I guess the reason why some fans were having that as well, because when I was interacting with people on Twitter earlier today, is because naturally, if you're seeing like, oh, we have this star-studded prospect that's ready to hit the bigs as an outfielder, but it's like, wait, but he's not necessarily like the best like on the depth chart right now because he's not at the MLB caliber status. Because like Trace Thompson, for example, like kind of the same applies with him in a way. But yeah, Drew is one of those guys where I think the Mets are going to make sure either way that he's up with the Mets. Not that they're going to rush him, but that he's going to be. I really don't think it's going to take him long. But then the Mets are going to find themselves in a position when they do bring up a Gilbert. What are you going to do with one of Harrison Bader or Tyrone Taylor, assuming that they're not injured? I think we very well...
Or DJ Stewart.
Or DJ. I mean, DJ, here's a question for you. Do you even think DJ is going to be actually physically on the Mets to begin the season?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he'll start the year on the team. I think he had a good spring training last year.
Right.
When we spoke to him, he talked about like he had a good spring, thought he was going to make it, and the only reason he really played bad at AAA was because he had a bad attitude, and he was a little disappointed that he didn't make it. But once he turned that around, started hitting well, got called up, looked great. There's also just a world where DJ Stewart is probably just a league average hitter. And I think people have to kind of get their head wrapped around that too. Like, as much as we love him, it was a pretty small sample last year where he was really good. And as the season got longer for him, the numbers went down. He had a really fun stretch. But at the end of the day, like, if DJ Stewart hits, keep him on the team as long as possible. But as soon as he stops hitting, he doesn't have value. So it's just one of those things where he's going to have to play for his job like every single day.
Yeah, and that's a tall task. You know, he balled out when he was getting like basically everyday reps. He's not going to get that heading into the season. You know, if he does crack this team, you know, he's more than likely going to be at best probably a platoon DH role. Again, assuming we could be proven wrong. Us Mets fans are proven wrong every freaking month, it feels like. But final things I'll say here about not DJ Stewart, but rather Ben Gamel, just briefly, for the freaks out there that are desperate to know about Ben Gamel like me. He's pretty much a career average hitter. So having that depth again is important. So for the people that are wondering why the Mets made the pickup, he barely played in the majors last year because he was on a San Diego team that wanted nothing to do with him with their outfield configuration as is. But in 2022, as again, an everyday player, 115 games, 9 home runs, 46 RBIs, and a 96 WRC plus. Career, he's a 96 WRC plus. So again, you're getting a league average bat versus, my goodness, again, not even Aaron Altares. I mean, holy shit, Keon Bronxton was like in our opening day lineup at one point.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like,
I need to go back to my video about him.
Oh my God. Wait, you did do a video on him. That was so.
Yeah.
Wait, was that like you hyping up the signing?
I was drinking the Brody juice for a little. It was a little too strong for me. I don't know. I think he drugged me.
That's hilarious. Oh my God. All right, guys. Well, I think that's gonna do it. This was a fun discussion. Little all over the place per usual. It's kind of that time of year, but you know, before we know it, we're gonna have games around the corner, all that fun stuff. So before I let you go, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time. Salute to you. Shout out to everyone watching live on our replay. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button for your boy. Subscribe to Giraffe Neck Mark at the Giraffe Neck Mark YouTube channel. Check him out, and my man James Shiano at the Mets Stuff Podcast, coming at you weekly, and their socials. Anything else brewing or coming up in the near future that people should know about?
Probably gonna talk to Trevor May soon. Working to get Jake Diekman on the podcast as well.
Oh, that'd be
that
fun.
Should be cool. Yeah, he's a buddy of mine, so that would be cool. And yeah, just ready to talk about baseball. I've had enough of the hypotheticals and this and that. I want to talk about games. I want to talk about performances. I want to talk about stuff. We're close. We're so close. We're almost there.
I want to overreact to every single strikeout right now. That's what I want. Please. That's all I ask. But
I want to see Jorge Lopez throw 98 and be like, "Oh my God, we got him.
we got him. Like, we may never lose again after winning like 2 straight games in spring." That'll do it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Check out Mark. Check out your boy